Welcome, friends. Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us to another lecture in our Pre-Chamber series. This week, we're covering the lecture, The Seven Races. Again, this lecture has been recorded before a live audience. All right. We like to start all these lectures with a quote from Master Samael. Samael says, "Natural selection has never conceived a new species into the canvas of existence." I mean, we remember from what we learned back in college, what we learned in school, we know that natural selection is a process of adaptation, where new abilities, new features, creatures create to be able to deal and cope with the environment in which they move. So it's interesting that Samael says this. But before going into the esoteric aspect of the lecture, let's speak of creation. And in terms of creation, what is creation from the perspective of our modern day science, or what we know today? We know that this all started with something called the Big Bang. And the Big Bang as a name is a little misleading because bang is immediately related or associated with an explosion. An explosion. But notice the timeline they have given us here. This is the first instance, and these next fields here, these are all seconds. For those of you who are young and at school, you can see that there is some scientific notation here, and it's speaking about how many zeros there are. So when we see this negative number, it means that the zeros are all happening before the decimal point. So these are just fractions of an instant from the first moment. And notice that as it corresponds to each one of those periods of time that go from 0 to 1 second, it is also showing the temperature that they estimate that was in the universe. Now it starts at around 10 to the power of 32 degrees. I mean, if 1 million has 6 zeros, if 1 billion has 9 zeros, you can only imagine how big is this number when it has 32 zeros associated to it. That's how hot it was. But in a matter of 1 second, it went from that space of having 10 to the power of 32 degrees to something to 10 to the power of 10 degrees. So there's a reduction of more than 20 orders of magnitude in just 1 second. And from that point forward, we see what we have today, in which after 13.7 billion years, we find ourselves here. So what happened between that first instant and where we find ourselves here today? Well, it is important that we understand that this idea of the Big Bang has nothing to do with an explosion. This is simply an expansion of space. And as an expansion of space itself, it brings with it a lot of phenomena happening concurrently and consequentially. First, it starts as something infinitely small and infinitely hot. It goes through a rapid expansion, and that rapid expansion results in an immediate rapid cooling, and the rapid cooling itself leads to the fundamental particles. Those of you who like a lot this idea of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, we're speaking here, these fundamental particles, these are leptons, gluons, quarks, all of those things that make up particles. But this phenomena of nucleosynthesis starts happening, and it starts allowing these subatomic particles, electrons, protons, and neutrons, to start coming together. And then the formation of the first elements, the simplest elements like hydrogen and helium, and the subsequent expansion leads to a more stable environment where there is a recombination of those atoms. So the electrons start combining in those electron shells, and it results in neutral atoms, meaning atoms that are perfectly balanced in terms of energy, and they can exist in that moment of creation without creating chaos anywhere else. So this is what we know, and I think that this is wonderful. This is like so interesting. There's so much to study here. But when it comes to Earth, as Earth starts cooling, the right causes and conditions start then creating environments for diverse and complex organisms to exist. At the very beginning here, we have the formation and the cooling of the earth. Now, science books will easily come and tell us, hey, this was just a collection of dust, gases that started colliding upon itself, gravitating to a particular center of unity. And as that is happening, well, there's still stuff that is flying throughout the cosmos, creating impacts, generating heat. There's radioactive decay. So this is a very chaotic earth. But with that cooling, we start seeing the formation of the atmosphere and the oceans. They say that in the beginning, the atmosphere of the earth was very different than what we have today. So instead of having 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and a little of the other stuff, it was mostly carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor. So as it starts cooling, we start seeing that all of that water vapor in the atmosphere starts condensing, depositing itself, giving way to the atmosphere and the formation of the oceans. But because the hard part of the planet is just not of an even shape, we start then seeing the formation of continents as a mass, and from there we go in the topic of science of speaking about the plate tectonics, and of course this thing called the Great Oxygenation Event. The Great Oxygenation Event is something very interesting because, as science tells us, this is the manifestation of photosynthetic organisms that can exercise photosynthesis, whether it is in plants above the surface or algae, corals below the water. And as they start nourishing themselves, they release that oxygen, and that starts fabricating the atmosphere as we have it today. Now this right here, maybe 4.5 billion years ago. This right here, maybe 2.4 billion years ago. In terms of time, very long periods of time. But this is what most of us have seen at school. This is what we have learned. So let's complement that a little bit with the perspective of esoteric occultism. And this is my favorite part. The three initiates in the writings of the book, the Kybalion, they bring us the 7 principles of manifestation. These 7 principles of manifestation help us understand the works of the universe. And the first principle is a principle of mentalism. And in this principle it states, the universe is mental and it is held in the mind of the all. And I think that this is so profound, because we know from science that Big Bang is not an explosion. I mean, an explosion means that there was something there, combustible, capable of and that there was a space in which it would expand into. And looking at the way that we operate, considering the principle of correspondence, we can allow ourselves to see how is it that the universe originated. Look, these 3 initiates, who are the ones who write the book of the Kybalion, they say, first of all, at the time of creation, there are no materials outside of the all. I mean, it would be impossible for there to be...
I think it's over there.
It would be impossible for there to be any materials outside of the all, because if anything existed outside of the all, it would be greater than the all itself, and that is impossible. And they say it is impossible for the all to subtract something from itself or to split itself, because then it would no longer be the all. And because the all does not reproduce or multiply itself, because it will violate the same fundamental principle of being the all, they say the all creates mentally and its spirit pervades the mental creation. So for all practical purposes, we are a thought within the creative cosmic mind of the all. Let me go take care of that. That may be a little known.
Are you locked in there?
So the three initiates tell us in the Kybalion, the all creates in its infinite mind countless of universe which exists for eons of time, and yet to the all the creation, the development, the decline, and the death of a million universes is as the twinkling of an eye. So the infinite mind of the all is the womb of all universes. They say, Principle of Correspondence tells us how is it that the all creates. We create with the mind. And even us, as a microcosmic man, we can fabricate a universe with our mind, but our mind is finite. In this case, the mind of the all is eternal. But this is in terms of the universe. Specific to mankind and how we are created, Hermes Trismegistus, in his discourses to Asclepius, to that, in the writings at Hermetica, he says, mankind was made by the cosmos and is in the cosmos. The cosmos is made by God and is in God. And as a consequence, the cosmos is a child of God, and we are children of the cosmos. The cosmos is like a second God, because there is a difference between the eternal God and there is a difference between the all. Let's remember that this cosmos as a God is beyond the eternity. It's beyond the eternity. If you're interested, you will be able to find this in Hermetica chapter 8. It's a title that is chapter that is titled that none of the things that are is destroyed, and they are mistaken who say that changes are deaths and destructions. It's a very interesting writing. So mankind was made by the cosmos and is in the cosmos, but this cosmos is the army of the word. It is the collection of all of these monads and intelligences that come to organize the chaotic creation. And that organization is driven by the law of seven, which is the law of the Eptabarapachinok. But speaking of man, knowing then that man is a child of the cosmos, that the cosmo creators are the ones that lead to the fabrication of man, we then can find many stories about creation. There is a story in the book of Genesis, but the fact is that all of the world's great religions, they share the very same principles. I mean, when we speak about Adam and Eve, what we need to understand is that these are symbols. And Adam and Eve are symbols not only of humanity, but the consequence of humanity, and they are also symbols of elements within the microcosmic man. Speaking of the book of Genesis then cannot be considered a historical textbook that gives us a chronological timeline. To this day, there are still some people who believe that Earth is 6,000 years old. That at some point, man was walking around with dinosaurs while they were tending to the garden. Okay? And these are incorrect perceptions. The book of Genesis is in reality a treatise in alchemy, and it gives us fundamental teachings on the transformation of man. Just like the book of Genesis is a treatise in alchemy, at the opposite side of the book that we have the book of Revelations. That Apocalypse, the book of Revelations, is also a treatise in alchemy of the same likes of the book of Genesis. So when it comes to Adam and Eve, what we come to see is that Adam is a symbol of the mind in terms of man. Eve is a symbol of the sexual creative organs, and the serpent that speaks to Eve is a representation of the mind, the emotions, and the desires, the tenebrousness of the ego. This is what the serpent is. Among the ancient practitioners, among the ancient alchemists, they used to venerate the daimon. Daimon has been incorrectly translated as devil, because it is not. The daimon is a force that exists within each and every one of us. It is what Samael refers to as the psychological trainer. It is what leads us, invites us into those temptations. And some may perceive that the fact that there is an element that is inviting into these temptations, that is bad. But that is just too much of a superficial appreciation of the contribution of this within us. How can we demonstrate mastery if it is not going through the test? I mean, the principle of correspondence explains this perfectly. The only way that you can graduate school is by satisfying the requirements, and to demonstrate each one of them, you have to take tests. And some tests are very difficult and arduous. And depending on how well you do on the test, is how much you are rewarded in that graduation. And the same thing happens in the path of initiation that is life. This source of temptation is what the alchemists referred to when they said, you must bleach the tin can. You must take that thing that is dark and bleach it so that it gets cleaned, so that it gets white. This is that representation of that fallen angel within each and every one of us. And so, as the source of temptation, as a representation of the mind, the emotions, and the desires of the ego, in the book of Genesis, what it is showing is that the sexual creative organs succumbed to those inferior thoughts. They succumbed to the moving of the inferior emotions, and as a consequence, the sexual organs fell. And when the sexual organs fall, by abusing them, well, not only Eve ate of that forbidden fruit, the sexual organs fell, the mind followed, because Eve is the one who gives that apple to Adam. So once the sexual organs get shocked and they lost their senses, the mind got clouded and lost its faculties as well. And as a consequence, there was a new realization. And in the book of Genesis, when Moses writes it, he says, they said, we are naked. They heard that God was walking through the garden. Said, where are you? Why are you hiding? They said, we just realized that we're naked. You see, that new realization of we are naked is the very same experience that many people have after they abuse of their sexual creative organs. They fall into the orgasm. The body experiences that just for a few seconds. And once that happens, people fall in a state of darkness. Why did I do this? Why is this happening? Why do I keep falling into this? That is that very same realization. This is just part of what the book of Genesis is telling us, but also from a knowledge perspective, this book is giving us here the narrative of what happened at the third subrace of the Lemurian era. I'm going to lead that for a little bit forward, but you will see. For us to speak about the 7 races and the 7 rounds, the best source of information that we have is the Stone of the Sun. This is the Aztec calendar. Many people confuse the Aztec calendar with the calendar of the Maya. And when 2012 was coming around, there were even books that were speaking about 2012, the demise of man, and they had the Aztec calendar on the front cover. So let's see, what is this? We're going to focus on the center, the heart of the stone of the sun. And here, this is just like super loaded with information. You can see that we have these arrows. These arrows are the rays of the sun, and they're pointing towards the corners of the earth. This right here, this wheel is called the tonali. And the tonali shows the 20 days of the calendar. Actually, if you're interested, we have 2 lectures in which we explain every one of these symbols, which is wonderful because when you're dreaming, if you come across and you see the flowers, or you see the lizard, or you see the dog or the rabbit, it gives you a lot of information. But this wheel is the tonali. As we dive into it, notice that there is a shape here that looks like a piece of a puzzle. You see that? That piece is called Oyin. That is a rune of movement. And this is the 5th era identified in the calendar. This rune of movement speaks of the current race, the Aryan race. And the meaning behind this piece right here is that this existing human race will end with the fire of earthquakes and fire. But inside that piece, we see that there are some critical elements. We see 4 characters, and here we see some claws. You can see that those hands have very sharp claws. They are claws of jaguars, and they are, both hands, they are crushing human hearts. That speaks of sacrifice. And those hands with claws, they are adorned with the number 3. That 3 is a number of creation, but it's also the forces of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It is also the force, the manifestation of our innermost as Atman, its spiritual soul, Buddhi, and its human soul, Manas. And here at the center, the first thing that we see is the face of Tonatiuh, which is the face of God. I'm going to show you real quick, but I'm going to show you in greater detail too. You can see the wrinkles in the eyes, showing that he is the Ancient of Days. You can see his hair. His hair is blonde. That hair is gold. That is because it's pure perfection emanating from that mind. You can see that there is a crown with 3 distinctive markings showing that God emerges from something bigger than that. And you can see that he is wearing a necklace, but his mouth is open. And out of his mouth, there is a very sharp tongue that is coming out, indicating that he creates with the power of the word. You can see it here better. This is the face of Tonatiuh. And Tonatiuh is the Ancient of Days. That is the same representation for the Aztecs as for us, is that image of God as an old man with long white hair and a long beard, or everything with curls. That they happen to be 13 curls. Because 13 is the arcanum of death. But look, we're going to focus on these 4 periods, and the way that we read them, just like in the Borgia Codex, we read from the right to the left. But here we're going to start with the first race. The first race is the protoplasmic race. This race ended by the son of Jaguar. This is Ocelotl, which means jaguar. Tonatiuh is God. And this son of Jaguar, the legends say that the first race was devoured by tigers. We cannot just think that tigers came out of nowhere and ate everyone. These jaguars are a symbol of the sagacity of the mind. These jaguars speak about those who have mastered the mind in such a way that they have created the perfect balance between the mind and the spirit, making the hum manas, or the human. The second son is Ehecatl Tonatiuh. Ehecatl is the god of wind. And the legends say that the second root race died because of the winds of hurricanes. No. Just like this speaks about the sagacity of the mind, those winds are a symbol of the chaotic thoughts. When the mind is not calm, when thoughts are coming in and out, that is the equivalent of a hurricane, a tornado. That is what that is saying. The third sun is Huahuiteltonatiuh, which is the son of the rain of fire. This one speaks of the Lemurian race. And then we have Atonatiuh, which is the son of water, which speaks up to the end of the Atlantean race. So what we will do today is that we're going to go from our closest relative, which is the Atlantean race, and we're going to go backwards from the Atlanteans to the Lemurians, back up to the Hyperborean race, and then we're going to go back into the polar race. All right. Let's start with Atlantis. This is a beautiful artistic rendition of Plato's Atlantis. In this image, which we found it thanks to the people at Vocal Media, it shows one of the 7 islands that helped make that land of Atlantis, and it shows this beautiful construction. But what do we know about Atlantis? We know that the people of Atlantis used to live between 800 to 900 years. I mean, that is a very long period of time. Even in the book of Genesis, it speaks about how these great men were living 600, 700. Somebody was 800 years when they bore children. I mean, amazing. The people of Atlantis were exceedingly tall by today's standards. They were anything between 8 and 10 feet tall. And Atlantis is just a lost continent of the ocean that bears its name. The land of Atlantis, and we will show you here in a second, actually it was mentioned in Plato's book Timaeus. And in the maps of Elliot Scott, these maps are available at Wikimedia Commons, and this map is from 1896. What Elliot Scott did is that he helped highlight where it was that in the 2,000 years ago, before the last cataclysm took place. He shows where the land was above water, relevant to the shape of the continents as we know them today. And the land of Atlantis here, as it's written in the Timaeus, west of the Pillars of Hercules, somewhere around here, okay, is this land right here. With the last cataclysm, the lands of Atlantis sunk. But there's a good story behind that. In terms of what the Atlanteans do, let's keep in mind the law of recurrence and the law of return. We learned about those laws when we spoke of the transmigration of the souls. The law of return, as a recap, it brings us back to our point of origin. And the law of recurrence allows everything that happened before to happen again, but seasoned with the consequences, the good ones and the bad ones. So what happens? In terms of technology and science, the people of Atlantis, they had mastered the ability to exercise orbital space travel. They had ships and they could get out of the atmosphere, just like we can do it today. They were still more advanced. In terms of science, they were capable of transplanting organs. I mean, some archaeologists, they get surprised when they're working and they come across a skull that has been very surgically altered. And they see how a fragment of the skull has been removed because work had been done in the brain. And this is some of what they used to do. They had the ability to levitate objects. And today, because of the law of recurrence, our scientists are starting to do that. The Atlanteans, Samael says, they were able to lift very heavy devices with a small artifact that they could carry in the palm of their hand. And they would grab these objects, and the objects would then overcome the pull of gravity, and they would be able to move these very heavy things. Today, our scientists are working with levitation of objects using the power of sound. We saw that when we spoke of the power of sound. How is it that they levitate droplets of liquid, small objects? But this is not new. The Tibetan Buddhists have been known to come together, arrange themselves in some geometric pattern, specific angles, and play drums and trumpets and just lift boulders up a mountain. So this is some of what they did. In terms of art and mysticism, they venerated the forces of nature. And even though we are seeing here the goddess Cybele, we're using this as a reference because here we see Cybele as a manifestation of the Divine Mother, but she is being carried in a Merkaba. A Merkaba is a chariot of gold. The Merkaba is a symbol of the solar bodies of man, of the To Soma Heliakon. But notice that this chariot is being pulled by lions, not by horses. Samael says at the times of Atlantis, these men that were 8-10 feet tall, they had domesticated the lions. And there are some images of in ancient Sumeria where you see these great men, these great gods, and they're holding a lion as if we were holding a cat today. They also had botanical gardens because they loved the beauty of nature. And they venerated that. And in terms of their mysticism, it has been spoken a lot about their temples of glass walls. Paul Schumann, I think they wrote a book titled I Discovered Atlantis, or The Discovery of Atlantis. And he speaks of the treasure of Priam. And in that treasure, as they opened those containers, those vases, inside the containers were coins that were minted as stamped at the temples of the transparent walls of Atlantis. And they also practiced philosophy and, of course, mystical practices. The Atlanteans were proficient in robotics and automation, just as today we are enjoying AI. The difference is that today we have a stationary device, like one of these little home companions like Alexa or Echoes or whatever. And rather than it being a static one operating under artificial intelligence, they fabricated robots similar to the automation that we see today, but they were able to transplant the soul of an elemental into the robot itself. So they will take the soul of a plant and move it into the robot rather than just coding artificial intelligence that frankly operates in ways that not even those of us who code it understand it. And these companions were very useful at their homes, just like the Alexas and the Echoes of today are very useful for us. Because they would be able to speak about upcoming weather events. They would be able to speak about what was happening around, but they would also be able to warn of dangers. In terms of their mystical practices, the Atlanteans worshipped the religion of Neptune. Neptune is the god of water. And Neptune is always shown with a trident. And the trident of Neptune is a symbol of the three primary forces of nature. Because the three spears are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And their great masters founded something that was called the Alcaldana Society. This Alcaldana Society, to no surprise, we see here an image of the Great Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. Well, the Alcaldana Society was a group of masters that helped everyone as they were born. When people were born, they would look at what was the astrological chart. Because knowing that the influences were archetypal, not just masses of rock and gas just floating around the space, because the influences were archetypal, they were able to help the parents and those newborns understand what is going to be their vocation. They would be able to help arrange marriages. So people would bring values and forces together in a way that would enable the internal development. This is what the Alcaldana Society did. And thing is that for each humanity, there is a truth that must be revealed. Those who reveal those truths to each humanity are the Bodhisattvas of the Cosmo Creators. In this case, the Atlantean race received the four truths from the Bodhisattva of Archangel Michael. And when the Bodhisattva of Michael came, the truth that he revealed was the knowledge of the human mind. You would remember from when we spoke of Atlantis that there were two men of name, Armanitora, and the other one, Conversión. And these two men are responsible for the polarization of the mind, for inviting the thinking that leads to the extremes and the consideration of nothing else in between, things being either good or bad. Okay? That type of polarization is exceedingly dangerous because it deprives you of the ability to find the good and the bad as much as to be able to perceive the bad in what appears to be good. This knowledge of the human mind was taught by the Bodhisattva of Michael, but the people did not listen. And just like today, the humanity in Atlantis degenerated. And it degenerated because of abusing of their sexuality, because of abusing of the resources of nature, because of that polarization of the mind creating that separation between you and me even further. And because of that, they degenerated to a point in which they became anthropophagy. They just consume human bodies with many other crazy ideas. If you eat their body, you're going to gain their strength and their powers, and now that's going to be in you. But not only that, they would go into the practice of human sacrifice. And we have learned that Ascoquin exists in the blood. So they would spill the blood and take the organs of those creatures, and they would use those organs to transplant them to other people. There was a queen called Queen Quetabel, beauty of mystery of dark mysteries. And it's been said that Quetabel was hundreds of years old, but looked like a young maiden, because many of those organs would end up going into her body. So as her endocrine system degenerated, they would replace things. And they will take those bodies and toss them to the peoples, and the people in their fanaticism will take them and will eat them. I mean, this is a degree of degeneration that is like brutal. But because as part of their science, they had the ability to work with atomic energy. Eventually, they used that atomic energy for the wrong purpose. John White, in his book, The Pole Shift, right there, he speaks about a layer of glass that was found several meters below ground level at the valley of the Tigris and Euphrates River. He says that when it was discovered at first, the scientists, the archaeologists believed that it could have been the product of a very ancient lightning strike, because when lightning strikes, it creates like a serpentine pattern, and the sand will crystallize. But as they continued digging, they found that it was a layer of glass and that it was fairly thick, which would be similar to what would happen with the detonation of an atomic device and all that heat in a place where there is a lot of sand. Okay?
I've heard that too in India. There's a place or two like that.
You're saying that you heard that in India, a place that is like that?
Yeah, I've heard that they've dug up a place that's like that, and that has like a layer of glass, but then it's very radioactive as well.
Radioactive glass. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So the people of Atlantis degenerated. And they even used the atomic energy. Atomic energy that they were using to power lighting systems out in the streets. They used it for nefarious purposes. And then there was the universal flood. The universal flood brought the demise of Atlantis. This universal flood is known in all of the great cultures of the world. I mean, people have heard about the Epic of Gilgamesh, in which the god Enlil was one of the ancient Sumerian gods related to the Anunnaki and all those great ones. Well, how is it that the god Enlil destroys the world? There's also in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis says, incorrectly translated, that Yahweh flooded the earth. No, this is an incorrect translation. Yahweh is the antithesis of Jehovah. As it's written with our Latin characters, it is YHVH. That is meant to be read Jehovah. Yahweh is the antithesis of it. So it's not that. It is that force of God that flooded the earth. And even in the Manvantara Sadhya, the Matsya avatar of Vishnu warned Manu Vaivasvata of the flood that was coming and told them, build a boat. So the great cultures speak of this. And it is that universal flood what brought the demise of Atlantis. It has been said that after people made fun of the sacred wisdom, as they polarize themselves and they consider so many things irrelevant and stupid, etc., when the floods were happening, the people were rushing to the temples, seeking for the help of the masters. And that there was a great master named Ramu. And Ramu stopped the yelling of the crowd and he said, go back to your women, your children, and your slaves. And if the future race does this same thing, they will also perish. And he closed the doors of the temple. And the floods came, and the rest is history. This was the demise of Atlantis, and this flood is that Atonatiuh, that son of the rain, that son of rain of the Aztecs, that speaks of the demise of Atlantis. So this is Atonatiuh as the son of water. Let's talk a little bit now about Kwahuitl Tonatiuh, because Atlantis came from somewhere. Just like we, as the children of the fifth son, are part of the seed of are seeded from Atlantean roots. The Atlanteans were rooted from the Lemurian race. So speaking of the Lemurian race, Lemuria is the third great race. And you see here the map of Elliot Scott. You can see that the configuration of the world was dramatically different. We can see a massive landmass. And
is the land the white or no, the red?
The red, yes. And of course this is a sphere, so this side right here is connected with this one on the right, and this right here is the continent of Mu. Easter Island, that is a remnant of Mu, somewhere around here, off the coasts of Chile.
Did the Lemurians and Atlantis live at the same time at all?
Yes, there is always some overlap.
Oh.
There is always some overlap. Yes. So here we find the continent of Mu. So what about the Lemurians? Lemurians, different than the Atlanteans, the Lemurians were hermaphrodites. The Atlanteans had physical bodies similar to yours and mine, men with a specific set of organs and women with a specific set of organs. Okay? But the Lemurians were initially hermaphrodites. That means that they had fully functional sexual organs, both masculine and feminine. But their sexual reproduction was not through a sexual act, but through gemation. Gemation is like a protrusion that comes from the body. In their case, it used to come from the legs. We see gemmation today in plants like the agave. You see that sprouts out of the plant itself. Okay? But the Lemurians were pretty massive. These were people who were 12 to 15 feet tall. I mean, these were giants that they will not fit inside this room. And different than the Atlanteans that lived 800, 600, 700, 800 years, 900 years, the Lemurians would be able to live 12 to 15 centuries. Now that is a massive amount of time. Now, here, notice these beautiful pictures in giants from another time. These monoliths right here, these are from Easter Island. Many people believed that what they had on the island, all facing east, were just heads. But as archaeologists continued their work, they found out that these were just rock monoliths that were just buried because of the effect of time. And you can see the size of the monolith, and you can see the size of the typical human. This is an Easter Island. This picture, we took this picture when we visited the Temple of Venus in Tula. As you go into the Temple of Love, the Temple of Love used to be massive and beautiful. What remains today is just the pyramid and the platform. But on the platform, there are 4 Atlantean masters. And you can see just the typical person, and then these Atlantean masters loaded with symbols, particularly this beautiful butterfly that is a symbol of the soul. And in terms of giants from another time, giants are mentioned in the book of Enoch. And we took this picture from the guys at the Y-Files, because they have a beautiful documentary about the Smithsonian, the findings of giants in Alaska and different places of the United States, how that was given to the Smithsonian, and how is it that the stuff now doesn't show up anywhere. So just as a warning, we're using this image here for educational purposes. This image has been claimed to be doctored, but just for perspective, here we can see what they would have looked like. But something happened at the time of Atlantis. I take that back. Something happened at the time of Lemuria.
So those were Lemurian masters, not Atlantean?
No, these are Atlantean masters. But they come, of course, from the seed of the Lemurian race. Showing them here because we have these monoliths close geographically. The South America, and then this is here in Central America. Giants in Easter Island, and we also see the giants in Mexico. Yeah. But something happened at the time of Lemuria. Humans were hermaphrodites. But at the time of the 3rd subrace, the sexuality was split. In the book of Genesis, it speaks about 2 different creations of man. We all know that there is a story in chapter 2 that says that God took from the dust of the earth, the dirt of the earth, and he shaped man. And after he shaped man, he blew the breath of life onto his nostrils, and man came alive. And there are many other stories like that. Stories among the Maya, the Aztecs, that men were made of corn, that man were made of wood. Okay? There's always a fabrication of man that implies that there is use of dense matter to create what we inhabit today as this microcosmos. But in the 3rd subrace, they split. Before the split, before this man was made, the book of Genesis in chapter 1 speaks about an initial creation of man. And it says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And this has been incorrectly read to be understood as he created them male and female. No. They were divine androgynes. They were hermaphrodites. And you can see it here, particularly when you look at an archangel like Archangel Michael. That is corpulent, strong, But when you look at his face, it has all the attributes of a woman. The same thing happens with Shiva. Shiva, strong, tall. The face of a woman with a very thick mustache. Balance between the masculine and the feminine principles. So what happened? In that third subrace, this sexuality was split. And you have already heard the story about Archangel Sakaki and his host of angels. How they gave humanity at the times of Lemuria the Kunda buffer organ to be able to stabilize the planet, because at the time that this was happening, the planet was still unstable. But once those sexualities were split, these are very ancient glyphs, carvings, statues, and they are all of a phallic nature. You see that? We can see here these beautiful women holding their hands, honoring the phallus. In the mysteries of the Lingam Yoni, we see Lord Shiva holding a cup. From the cup, there is a lingam that rises, and from the lingam, there is water. That lingam is a symbol of the masculine creative organ. The cup is a symbol of the feminine creative organ. And we see here a devotee with his hands on the chest, and you can see that the phallus is very prominent. Here we see the man and the woman in matrimony, and we can see that they are wearing what is called in Spanish a mandil. Mandil is like the sacred apron that is used in masonry as a symbol of elegance, of purity, of chastity. Thinking of Elliot Scott map, at the times of Lemuria, at the times of Atlantis, matrimonies will come together and they will migrate. They will go from wherever their tribes existed, and they will go in caravans to the temples. This is why we have the 7 cosmo creators here visible. And they will consummate their marriage at the temples. There would be no consummation of marriage out at home, in the dark, on your own. It was a sacred ritual. And they will come together at the temples, and all these married couples would be consummating the marriage under the guidance and the supervision of divine beings, of divine masters. They will unite themselves. They will sing sacred mantras. They will transmute their sexual creative energies in that ecstasy, and with that they will awaken the power of Kundalini. With that work, they will fabricate superior existential bodies of the being. Today, this idea of the migration of couples still happens today. And this is what humans today call the honeymoon. But it is the same concept. You get married, you go somewhere else to consume the marriage. With the difference that before, it was considered a sacred ritual. Today, it is not. And at the times of Lemuria, the Bodhisattva of Uriel was sent to deliver the third truth. And the third truth is the knowledge of sin and desire. So Uriel sent its Bodhisattva, and it came to give the wisdom of the knowledge of sin and desire. But now that they had the effect of the Kunda buffer organ, they did not heed the warning. And being now with the effect of the Kunda buffer organ now removed, sexuality split, and affecting the 5 cylinders of the human machine, now there is a deeper appreciation, a deeper love for the dense matter, for the sensations, the inability to transform the impressions. And what happens? Uriel gives the message. Lemurians had all their faculties awakened. I mean, their 7 chakras were certainly active. Their sense of sight was so developed that they could perceive a whole hortampanas. A hortampanas is 5.5 million different shades of color. So they could perceive not only the astral light, they could see all of the variations of the astral light. In terms of aura, Anibesan gives a nice matrix of colors. I think there are 16, 20 different combinations that allow you to see if somebody is spiritually selfish because of the colors of the aura, if they are kind, if they are in a dark mood, whatever. They could all perceive that. And because those senses were open, particularly at the creative larynx, they were able to perceive the symphonies of the universe. They could speak in the universal language. Samael says this language is a language that contains 300 consonants, 51 vowels. I mean, today we have 26 letters. 5 of them are considered vowels, really 7. But 5 of them considered vowels. Some people don't know how to speak. But eventually they degenerated. They did not consider this wisdom on the knowledge of sin and desire. And as they degenerated, as the doors of the temples were closed to those who started abusing of the sacred act. Samael says, the time we fell in Lemuria, we fell because we took the act from the temples and we started practicing it in our villages. Samael says that they used to live in these huge huts, like a communal hut, and they will come together and move by the Luciferian fire. They went with the sensation and not with the devotion. So they spilled the sacred cup. That means they went into enjoying the sexual act for the sake of the orgasm. The doors of the temple closed. And the moment that happened, they could not go back. Many of them continued degenerating in such a way that as they were out there, they started connecting sexually with other beasts. Samael says that is the origin of the ape. Those are inferior creations originated by the abuse of the sexual creative energy, by the abuse of the sexual act. But let's go back in time a little more. And from the times of Lemuria, let's go to the Hyperborean race. The Hyperborean race was ended by Ehecatl, which is the son of wind. So by now you have seen how the abuse in Atlantis of the creative power led to the waters from bringing that civilization to an end. Here we can see how the abuse of the sacred fire brought the rain of fire into Lemuria and brought it to an end. So what about the Hyperborean race when we speak about the son of wind? Hyperborea was the second great race, and it existed in the North Pole casket. Okay. Samael says these beings were not hermaphrodite, they were androgynes. Both masculine and feminine faculties existed in them. It was not just the organs. And the reproduction of the Hyperborean race was through sprouts, like spores. When that creature was developed enough, it would come up. And at this time, because this is so far back in time, the kingdoms of nature were still intermingled. There was overlapping. When this happened, the earth was still transitioning from the ethereal plane into the physical plane. So because the kingdoms of nature were intermingled and overlapped, there were animals with plant attributes. Today those still exist. There are many insects out there that you look at them and you don't know if they are a plant. There were many plants with mineral type faculties. Something similar to that, the corals today. You see? So the kingdoms of nature intermingled and overlapped. And what happens here with the people of Hyperborea? The Bodhisattva of Archangel Raphael came to give the wisdom. That wisdom was the knowledge of human fragility. You're going into this exercise, but you must know these are the dangers. And as he teaches them, well, the Hyperboreans, these are some very ancient artifacts that some people believe that predate the Lemurians. Because this was a race that was semi-ethereal, semi-physical. They had the ability to elongate or shrink their physical vehicle at will. That means that they had all of their jinn faculties intact. Mahima, Lahima, etc. They could grow tremendously, they could shrink themselves, they could become very heavy, they could become very light. They could do all these things. They were able, of course, to see the ultra of nature, and they were ruled by the supermen of nature. These supermen were the great masters. These were the cosmo creators. But because now they had mobility, because the ego was already being created, they knew of conflict and they knew of war. They did not heed the teaching of the fragility of the human nature, that human fragility, and they fell. Now, one thing, I think it was here. Perfect. Okay. And then before them, then there was the polar or the protoplasmic race. This is the one ended by by the son of Jaguar. I forgot the name right now. This humanity lived in the sacred land of Tuli. This island is listed here. Notice that you can see that this is close. This is close to the North Pole. This is like the land of Alaska today. Okay. Because this was so close to the beginning of the Earth. The father-mother carried both polarities. The reproduction was similar to the meiosis that we see in cellular reproduction. And the consistency of matter was substantially different. So because this polar protoplasmic race existed, rather than relying on matter outside, they used the matter of the ideoplastic. That is the same matter that you use in your mental creations. Perhaps this is exactly why quantum physicists today ask the question, what exactly are thoughts made of? The polar race, as they came to exist, when they celebrated their sacred rituals, they would wear sacred vestments. But their vestments would be both black and white. And that black and white was it's such a stark difference to show the conflict between the spirit and matter. All the symbols in their vestments were inverted. And they were inverted because coming from the realm of the spirit, they now had to adapt themselves into this dense form that they had not experienced before. Archangel Uriel came into this humanity as a cosmo creator, and he gave them the runic alphabet. So the origins of the runic alphabet predate all humans. And it is here at this race that the Bodhisattva of Archangel Gabriel came to reveal the first truth. And that was the knowledge of the pains and the misery of this world. So Gabriel delivers this wisdom. Many here in this race, going through this conflict of matter and spirit, they came to embody this particular wisdom and make themselves ready for the next race. Of course, understanding the pains and misery of this world allows them to develop that sagacity of the mind, to learn how to navigate in the dense realm. As these humanities manifested, they have come to manifest because there have been different rounds. Samael clarifies the flow of the ray of creation. Blavatsky speaks of rounds, and she shows them in her book, The Secret Doctrine, this book right here, the second volume. Speaking of the tree of life, we know that in the tree of life we have three primary triangles. We have the triangle of Asilut, that is the realm of the gods. We have the triangle of the innermost, where we have Atman, Buddhi, and Manas. And here we have a triangle of magic. In this red triangle of magic, where we learn to work with the forces of nature, we have the mind, the emotion, and the vitality. This is the mental plane, the astral plane, and the ethereal plane. And the condensation of the ethereal plane is Malkut, which is where we are today. The principle of polarity indicates that there is a mirror image of this down here. And the mirror image indicates the tridal cosmos, or the third order of worlds, which are the infernal worlds. So whatever exists here as the crown of life, there is an antithesis all the way down here in the most dense region of creation, and so on. But notice that here, Blavatsky speaks about planetary division, and she shows the flow of these rounds. And she says, this is the path that is taken when things are descending into matter. You can see here our Earth or any visible planet. That visible planet is called the Deuterocosmos, which is the second order of worlds. And from the dense matter, how is it that it rises and ascends once again into the realm of the spirit? She uses the density of lines just to show the density of laws as they apply. And in these rounds, we have the polar rays manifesting in the first round. As we start transitioning from the ether down into the dense form of Malkut, we start seeing the second rays in the second round, the Lemurian race in the third one, and the Atlantean race as part of the fourth round. Here we find the Aryan race, and it says here a manifestation of the ether, because we must learn to work with something that is called as Matsya, the 5 M's of the Pancatagua ritual. This is why we let the Pancatagua ritual related. And once we are done with this Aryan race, we will be transitioning then from this low realm back into the ether. Notice that the way that she speaks about the flow of the human principles, it indicates how it goes from the realm of the spirit into the realm of the soul, how it goes then into the realm of the mind. If we compare what she is saying here with the tree of life that may be more familiar to us, this realm of the spirit is Chesed, the realm of the innermost. The realm of the soul, or the vehicle of the spirit, is Chebura, which is the realm of the spiritual soul. And this realm of the mind is what the Theosophists refer to as Manas, the superior Manas, that is Tiferet. That is the realm of beauty. So this is Atman, Buddhi, and Manas. But it descends into the realm of the animal soul, and for that, it has to go into the inferior Manas, or the sphere of Netza. It goes and experiences manifestation of life in the realm of the emotion, right there in Chod. And then, with the astral body, the experience of the body of life, which is that realm of the ether, to come here in this place where all the 6 principles are manifest in the sphere of Malkut. Okay? That is what she is saying. So as it descends from the 6th dimension into the 5th one, the 4th one, and the 3rd, so it descends from the 6th, the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd, to go back into the 4th, the 5th, and once again into the 6th dimension. What we have here is the Aryan race at the bottom of this cycle. And with the end of the Aryan race, there will be a new race. That new race is to be called the Koradi race. Koradi, K-H-O-R-D-I. Some people write it K-O-R-D-H-I. But that would be the Koradi race. And that race will start seeing a transition from the dense matter into the ether once again. And once that race is done, the seventh race is known to be a race of very small men. I mean, we come from Lemurians, Atlanteans. Today we find ourselves here. Even amongst us, there are many people that are already showing a lot less height. So once we move into the sixth race, expected to be smaller, live less time. Into the seventh race, the race of the Lilliputians, because expected to be very small, live very less time. Okay.
So does so it would be less dense in the future race? Is the Earth also less dense, or is it just the people?
No, the Earth too. Yes. When we spoke of the rings of Alzion, entering into the rings of Alzion is going to help with that transition because of all that extra Menashic energy. Yeah. After the seventh round, there's no more. All of those seeds that make up the planet, the organisms in the planet, you and me, all of us, all of those seeds will return into the Iliaster. The Iliaster are the germs of life. So we'll go back into that state. So it's important to achieve mastery. And once that happens, there's going to be a submersion in the cosmic night, which is a Pralaya. So there's going to be a great dissolution. Everything goes back into the bosom of the Father until once again, at some point, all of those great monads start creating an imbalance in the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. They start experiencing that longing of being, and then the awe, once again, in his thought manifests a new creation, and we see another great expansion, so that other scientists can then speak again of the Big Bang. Samael, Archangel Samael sent his Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva of Archangel Samael is Aum Veor. So Samael, Aum Veor, is the Bodhisattva of Samael. And Samael comes to reveal the fifth truth. That fifth truth is exactly what we have been sharing here. It is the knowledge of the tree of the science of good and evil. It is the knowledge of the consequence of eating the forbidden fruit. It is how to work with those creative powers in a way that we can awaken the fire of Kundalini, that we can fabricate superior existential bodies, so that we can move into realms that go beyond the eternity. Thank you everyone for joining us today. May all beings be happy.